So it seems I have something else to confess, and it's that I've been cutting a corner, and I think it's caught up with me. That is the drawstrings on hoodies. So if we look at our reference, virtually every front side of a hoodie has drawstrings, except for this one. The guy has pulled them out, but still it leaves the hole for the drawstrings. And I kind of forgot about these, and once I realized I forgot, I wondered if I could get away without them, thinking surely there's a hoodie design out there that doesn't have drawstrings. But ultimately, I've decided we should add them. I think humans expect to see them on a hoodie, and right now it's kind of reading lazy and unrealistic on the front side. So I want to add those in this video, and it shouldn't take that long because they're fairly simple and we have the structure in place to be able to make this happen fairly quickly. So what I'm going to do is enable our overlays. We can turn off face orientation. I'm going to shift right click at the place where I want the drawstring hole to be, this thing. So it's a simple torus with a cylinder coming out of it that, falls on the chest. So let's start by Shift A, adding a mesh circle. And then I can align it to the view, which is facing forward. I'm going to need to change the radius to be visible, like let's say 0.01 meters. And then for the vert count, let's go down to 16. And that should be good enough to start us off on the drawstring. I'll tab into edit mode. We'll scale down, just kind of ballpark the thickness based on the photo. I think this should be pretty good. And then Control 3 will go to the side view. If your viewport is slow, you can turn off the particle system. Let's see, it looks like you can only do that in the render from the outliner. So let's go to, I guess, select the hoodie, go to particle systems and turn off viewport visibility on the hoodie fuzz. We'll go back to our hoodie circle and then E to extrude. And we'll come out a little bit, about a 45-degree angle, and then Control right click to begin extruding the rest of the hoodie drawstring. Okay, it looks like we're penetrating the chest. So let's grow our selection in wireframe view until we're not penetrating like that. You can also choose proportional editing to make this a little easier. And then speaking of cutting corners, if we're going to have the camera stop above this line, we don't have to add the end, right? Which typically has some sort of knot or just the crimped end. And so if you know you're not going to render below this point, you can definitely leave that off. But in the spirit of not cutting too many corners, let's go ahead and add the crimped end. So extrude, scale it down, and then let's see, we're going to have to fill this, and then E to extrude again. All right, so that's going to be good enough for the end. Maybe add one more holding edge down there. We'll go ahead and add 2. Push that one out a little bit. Give it a little more reinforcement so that whenever we tab to object mode, hit Control 2, we get a nice smooth curve. I need to have one on the end to reinforce that edge as well. And then maybe I to inset on the end. Okay. It is kind of floating off in space though, isn't it? Let's use proportional editing to rotate that back. Make sure it's just laying on the chest like that. And then as far as the top, let's extrude it into the rim of the hoodie, maybe scale it down a bit as well. And then with our cursor still at the origin of this hoodie drawstring, let's go back to object mode, Shift A, Mesh, and Torus. We'll open up our options. Now this is going to be pretty huge. So let's take the major segments. Whoops, accidentally deselected. So let's add that torus again. And major segments, let's go down to 16. Minor segments, let's go down to 6. That should get us where we want to go. Then we'll scale this down. Let's say 0.1, S 0.1 again. Control A to apply the scale. And then we'll enable face snapping, align rotation to target. And when I hit G and hold Control, that will align itself to the surface of the hoodie. And we need to find a good position so that this hoodie drawstring looks like it's coming out of this hole. All right, now as far as this whole rivet, I'm not sure exactly what you'd call this. I want to select the outside edge and Alt-S to push it out a little bit. And then Control-B to bevel. But I want to have 2 segments instead of 1. And now in object mode, when I shade smooth and Control-2, that looks pretty close to what we see in our reference. And then the only thing we have to do in terms of the model is I want to sculpt a little bit of structure so that the whole looks like it's attached to the fabric. So if we select our hoodie, jump into sculpt mode, I'm going to take our inflate brush with the I hotkey and start to build up along the sides. And wow, that annotation is really annoying to look at. So basically bringing the fabric out to meet the whole object and then push down so that we don't have any intersection. Smooth where needed. And then you can also use the grab brush to kind of bring it out flush. And I might need to inflate some of this to kind of make room for the hole. All right, now it looks like the hole is part of the actual fabric. I think it also helps to kind of build up a bit of a ridge around the hole. There we go. I think that's going to work out well. Okay, now it's fully integrated. I can grab my mouse again. And for the material, I want to use UV coordinates for our drawstring itself. Since it's a simple cylinder, it's easy enough. We can tab into edit mode, and I just want to cut a seam on the inside, the least likely to be seen area. And then cut a seam around the end cap and deselect one edge. Control E, mark seam. Select everything with A, U, unwrap, and let's change this to the UV editor. Get rid of the render result. Hit A to select everything. There we go. That's what I want. I want it to be straight up and down in terms of orientation. Though I want to get rid of these squiggly lines. So let's SY to scale flat. Scale it out a bit just to try and keep it an even cylinder. We don't want the UVs to reflect the shape of the cylinder. We want it to be, laid out and as flat as possible. Right now it's reflecting too much of the contour. Doesn't have to be perfect, but as far as the crimped edge, I might need to scale this out as well. Okay, this should work out fine. We're not going to be painting a texture. We're just going to be using the coordinates intentionally like we did with the hoodie material. And now that that's laid out, we can hit the new button to create a new material. We'll call it hoodie drawstring. And let's first try our weave material, or the weave node group. CGC textile weave A, shift control click on it, switch to rendered view. Let's see what that looks like. I might have scale values still applied. Yes, I do. Wait, no, I don't. I was looking at the dimensions. The scale is set to 1. Okay, so scale is proper, but the size of the weave is really tiny. Oh, that's right. We're also using UV space. So the UVs are laid out huge compared to the hoodie material. So let's take the scale value way down to like 0.1. Okay, 0.01. Okay, now we're getting somewhere because these drawstrings always have a type of weave pattern. And we might be able to get close with our node group. I don't know, though. I'm not going to stress too much over it. Again, I want the drawstring to be there, and the goal is just to make it register as believable. It's not the focus of the image, so it has less pressure of being absolutely perfect compared to the face, for example. But I don't want it to be a poor approximation of a real thing. So, yeah, I'm not sure if this is going to work. 0.02. Well, I don't know. I have enough hoodies. I'm sure you do too. This reminds me of the type of weave on a hoodie drawstring, or at least on some of them. So I'm going to say it's valid. Maybe we'll do 2 versions, and this will be the first one. But as far as plugging it into the material, we'll keep it the same as our hoodie in terms of not having any specular. We'll plug this into a color mix RGB node as an overlay where we can determine the base color, which we want to be a gray like our hoodie. Something like this, probably a low mix value or overlay value. Let's try 0.3. And let's crank up the sheen to like 5. Let's see here. Can we see the sheen in effect? Yeah, we can. What about 10? 10's maybe a better value. And then we also want to use this for a bump. So vector bump, and we'll use it as the height. See what that looks like by itself. It's a little bit sharp, isn't it? What about 0.2 strength? It's definitely on the sharp side. Wonder if I can salvage that with a color RGB curves. You know, try and cut off the harsh edges. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think this is going to work. That's just a little too harsh. If we plug that into our normal socket. Again, you know, it might be fine if we're zoomed out, which we will be. We're already zoomed in and rendering very large in terms of the whole portrait, so there's no chance we'll be rendering this close or this big. But it does bother me. I'm right on that edge of like being good enough and not good enough at the same time. So yeah, these sharp edges might kill this weave pattern. Let's try something different. Let's try a texture, Voronoi texture. Trusty Voronoi, useful for so many things. Shift A, add a texture. Well, just Control T, we have the node wrangler enabled. So we'll use the UV coordinates, and we'll take our scale up to like 50. Maybe 40. And so the randomness value is at 1 by default, but if we turn that off, we get a perfectly uniform pattern. And so this can actually become this type of weave, which is sort of like a hair braid. And so if we use this in our bump map, let's see what that looks like. All right, it's going to be too strong, or is it? I can't really tell which way it's pointed, but I do want to try and smooth out the bright peaks, just like I did for the micro skin detail. And so we can use that same converter color ramp trick. All right, switch to B-spline. And I really want to know what direction this is pointed. Do I have it on invert? No. Okay, so I need to flip it around. There we go. Drag the black all the way up and the white up as well. All right, we're not going to be able to see what the raw color information looks like, so we're going to have to lean on the bump itself. And does that, it looks inverted, doesn't it? Strange. I don't know why I would have to invert that. But what I'm trying to do is remove this peak right here. And the way we did that before is dragging the white flag really close, Control adding another flag right beside it, and then crossing over. All right, that's going to smooth out the peak a little bit better. Okay, now let's try rotating in X and Y, I think both of them to 45. All right, you see what that's doing? You know, it's not a perfect weave, but it's in the ballpark. And then maybe introduce a little of the randomness, like 0.2. What about 0.5? Yeah, maybe not that much. Let's just go 0.2, just for a little bit of offset. All right, let's see what this looks like plugged into the material now. Yeah, I think that's bumped the right way. I don't know why I would have to invert it. But I think we're on the right track for this weave. Maybe increase the bump strength to like 0.3. What about the scale of the Voronoi? Let's go back to 50. Okay. Let's leave local view. See what it looks like in context. Yeah, see, I think that's going to work out fine in terms of approximating this pattern. Now the question is going to be, do I need a fuzz layer on the drawstring? I'm afraid I will have to, because it's going to look like a game art model. You know, we have this bump detail, but the silhouette doesn't change at all. And I think we're going to need that fuzz layer to sort of cover the normal map sin, so to speak, or illusion in order to cross over into believability. And also I might need to kind of adjust how it's overlaid. Yeah, so I think I need its own color ramp up here. We'll backspace to reset that node. Yeah, something more like this to overlay. Then we don't need these. Okay, yeah, that's a little bit better. Kind of defining that braid structure a bit. Though 0.7 is a little too high. How about 0.5? Okay. Now let's add the fuzz after I rename it to drawstring.r. Torus is drawstring_whole.r. And back to the drawstring, make sure I'm selected it correctly with the overlays. Let's add a particle system and go ahead and select that fuzz data from the hoodie object and immediately duplicate that data. And we'll rename it to be drawstring fuzz. And it looks like we can already see that being rendered, but it looks completely fuzzy. So yeah, our numbers would be way off. We don't need this many for such a small object. So let's take the number down to like 50. All right, that's looking better. It's basically 50 times 100. I think that's too much. How about we go 50 times 50? All right, and this is just the viewport. It's also a little long. You know, you can't see a lot of data from the photos about what this fuzz would look like, but let's see. I'm probably going to have to do a render. Also, it needs a better material. Let's add another slot to our object materials and select the hoodie fuzz. We don't need to make a new material for this. There we go. That's already looking better. Assuming that is still the selected, yeah, hoodie fuzz material. So yeah, I feel like it's a little bit long. And if I remember correctly, it's the random value strength that kind of pushed the fuzz outward. So if I change that to like 0.002, yeah, it does reduce the length seemingly. All right, so let's see what this looks like. Well, before I render it, let's just add a metal material that's really simple. Add it to our drawstring whole. New material, we'll call it drawstring whole. And it just needs to be fully metallic, specular, down, roughness, let's set to like 0.3. And then the value of the color needs to be a little bit darker, I think. Let's look at our reference. It's looking pretty close. All right, that should be good enough for an initial render. So make sure I am in slot 2 of the render result. Or, oh, this was not rendered into slot 1. So slot 8 for comparison, and render that. Hey, I think that's looking pretty good. I should do a comparison, though, rendering it without the fuzz. So let me turn that off on that object for render time and switch to slot 1 and render again. All right, let's see the comparison of the drawstring. This is no fuzz and this is with fuzz. Well, that's a pretty big difference. No fuzz with fuzz. You know, I think that's a really big improvement. What's the render time difference? Wait a minute. It gained 2 seconds to render no fuzz. That doesn't make any sense. But at least it's not taking any longer to render with the fuzz. And yeah, I think that covers up the fact that it's a normal map pretty believably. All right, I just need to duplicate this to the other side, modify it a bit so it's asymmetrical, and we will be done. All right, so we'll select these objects, Shift D, move over in X, orient these properly, make sure that the drawstring is leaning against the chest, turn on proportional editing, and then make them asymmetrical just so they're not perfectly straight up and down. I can do that to the other one as well. That should be good enough. and then add that sculpted detail so the hole is incorporated into the fabric. And it looks like there's an artifact down here. Might as well clean that up with the Shift Smooth tool, or brush I mean. And then to the inflate brush, hold Control to push an actual hole into the geometry. And then we'll build up that rim around the hole. And now we can do a render, and we should be finished. Oh, but I need to make sure I turn on the fuzz in the render context at least. I should also rename the particle system, huh? And we'll kick off that render. Okay. Yeah, I think that's going to work for a pair of drawstrings. I would say overall the hoodie is much more believable at first glance, and that's a big victory, especially considering we're going to be focused up here. Now I feel good about moving on to facial hair.